What would you do if you discovered the man you loved married you for revenge? Tonight, in a penthouse worth $47 million, overlooking the glittering chaos of New York City, Donald Sterling is about to hear 3 words that will change everything. I repulse you. Not I love you. Not happy anniversary. But a confession so cruel, so calculated, it would break most women. Most women. But Donald Sterling isn't most women. This is the story of a wife who played the long game. A billionaire who thought he was the hunter. And a smile that concealed the kind of revenge that doesn't just destroy a man, it erases him. And what you're about to discover will change how you think about love, betrayal, and the true cost of vengeance forever. The champagne is Dom Perignon, vintage 2008. The penthouse is silent except for the sound of rain against floor-to-ceiling windows. Marcus Faith stands in his $15,000 suit, his gray eyes cold as winter steel. You've repulsed me since day one, he says. Each word lands like a blade. Did you really think I loved you? Donald doesn't cry, doesn't scream, doesn't beg. She smiles. It's the kind of smile that makes Marcus hesitate. That plants the first seed of doubt in a mind that's never doubted anything. I know, she whispers. 2 words. That's all it takes for Marcus Faith to realize he's made the biggest mistake of his life. But let's go back. 5 years earlier. Before the penthouse. Before the marriage. Before the masterclass in destruction that neither of them saw coming. Donald Sterling was 28 years old. Brilliant, broke, and buried under her dead father's debts. Richard Sterling, once a powerful businessman, had died leaving nothing but shame and a daughter with an MBA from Harvard she couldn't afford to use. She was working double shifts at a boutique consulting firm, living in a studio apartment in Queens, eating ramen 4 nights a week. That's when she met him. Marcus Faith. 53. Self-made billionaire. CEO of Faith Industries, a conglomerate worth $8.7 billion. He walked into her life like he owned it, because in many ways he did. He was magnetic, powerful, the kind of man who commanded rooms without raising his voice. When he looked at Donald, she felt seen for the first time since her father died. 3 months later, he proposed. Everyone warned her. He's too old. It's too fast. What does a billionaire want with someone like you? But Donald ignored them all. Because when Marcus looked at her, she didn't feel like her father's broke daughter. She felt like someone worth $47 million penthouses and diamond rings that cost more than cars. She said yes. What Donald didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that Marcus Faith had been planning this moment for 30 years. You see, Richard Sterling wasn't just Donald's father. He was Marcus's former business partner. The man who'd betrayed him, stolen millions, and left Marcus bankrupt at 30 years old while Richard built an empire on stolen foundations. Marcus spent 3 decades clawing his way back, building Faith Industries from nothing, becoming wealthier than Richard ever was. But wealth wasn't enough. He wanted revenge. And when Richard died, leaving behind only a brilliant daughter drowning in debt, Marcus saw his opportunity. He would seduce her, marry her, give her everything her father had stolen from him, make her dependent, make her love him. And then he would destroy her. The marriage was a 5-year performance. Cold, calculated, cruel in ways that left no bruises. Marcus withheld affection like a weapon. His words were designed to diminish her, to make her feel small in their world of infinite luxury. Every anniversary, he grew colder. Every public event more distant. He paraded mistresses, made business decisions that humiliated her, turned their marriage into a gilded cage. And Donald played her part perfectly. The devoted wife. The wounded woman. Always hoping he'd change. Always believing the man she married was still in there somewhere. But here's what Marcus Faith didn't know. Donald Sterling wasn't playing the victim. She was playing him. Before we dive into this incredible 40-minute journey of revenge, wealth, and the smile that destroyed a billionaire, I want to be honest with you. This video took many hours to research, good hours to write, and quality hours to produce. Every detail was carefully crafted to bring you the most compelling version of this story. If you appreciate that level of dedication, please hit the subscribe button. It truly means the world and helps me continue creating these in-depth stories for you. Now, let me ask you this. Have you ever wondered what separates those who seek revenge from those who achieve it? Drop your thoughts below. Because tonight, you're about to witness a masterclass. Donald Sterling's father died on a Tuesday. No warning. No goodbye. Just a heart attack at 62 that left her standing in a hospital corridor, holding coffee that had gone cold hours ago. She was 27, alone, and about to discover that everything she thought she knew was a lie. Richard Sterling had been a titan. At least, that's what Donald believed. CEO of Sterling Analytics, a consulting firm with offices in 3 states. The man who sent her to Dalton Academy, who paid for Harvard, who taught her that success wasn't given, it was taken. But at the funeral, the creditors came. Her father's attorney sat her down in a conference room that smelled like leather and old money. He slid a folder across the mahogany table. "Your father was bankrupt," he said. "For 2 years. The house in Greenwich? Mortgaged. 3 times. The cars. Leased. Her mother's jewelry? Sold to pay interest on loans Donald never knew existed. Sterling Analytics collapsed like a house of cards. Employees unpaid. Clients furious. Investors demanding blood. And Donald inherited all of it. The debt. The shame. The whispers. Within 6 months, she'd lost everything. The childhood home sold at auction. Her mother's belongings packed into boxes she couldn't afford to store. She moved into a 400-square-foot studio in Queens that cost $1,800 a month. Cheap by New York standards, impossible on her salary. She worked at Meridian Consulting. Entry-level analyst. $42,000 a year. Her Harvard MBA gathering dust while she crunched numbers for clients who made more in a week than she'd see all year. Double shifts became normal. Ramen became dinner. Pride became a luxury she couldn't afford. But Donald didn't break. She adapted. Because Richard Sterling had taught her one thing that remained true even after everything else fell apart. Never let them see you weak. Marcus' faith didn't come from money. He built it. Brick by brick. Deal by deal. Starting from a 1-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn with nothing but ambition and an economics degree from a state school nobody remembered. By 30, he'd made his first million in real estate arbitrage. Buying distressed properties, flipping them, reinvesting every dollar. By 40, he was worth $50 million. By 53, his net worth hit $8.7 billion. Faith Industries owned everything from commercial real estate to tech startups to media companies. If it made money, Marcus owned a piece of it. He lived in a penthouse on Central Park West worth $47 million. Drove a Bentley Continental GT he never drove himself. Why would he when he had a driver? He wore Brioni suits, Patek Philippe watches, and the kind of confidence that only comes from knowing you can buy almost anything. Almost. But here's what the Forbes profiles never mentioned. What the business journals never investigated. Marcus Faith was a man built on revenge. 30 years earlier, he'd had a business partner. A man named Richard Sterling. Together, they'd started a consulting firm that was supposed to make them both rich. Instead, Richard stole everything. He manipulated the books, transferred assets, filed paperwork that left Marcus with nothing but bankruptcy and a reputation so destroyed he couldn't get a loan from a loan shark. Richard Sterling walked away with millions. Built Sterling Analytics on the foundation of Marcus's stolen work. And Marcus. He clawed his way back from zero. Every success fueled by rage. Every billion earned as proof that Richard Sterling had tried to bury the wrong man. When Richard died, Marcus felt cheated. He'd planned to destroy the man publicly. To take everything Richard had built and burn it to ash while Richard watched. But then Marcus learned about Donald. Richard's daughter. 28. Brilliant. Broke. Buried under her father's debts. And Marcus saw something better than destroying Richard Sterling. He saw the chance to destroy Richard's legacy. His bloodline. His daughter. Marcus engineered their first meeting like he engineered everything. With precision. Meridian Consulting was pitching Faith Industries for a contract worth $12 million. Donald was assigned to the research team. Junior analyst. Not important enough to be in the room, but essential enough that her work would be noticed. Marcus read her analysis personally. It was flawless. Sharp. The kind of thinking that came from someone who understood not just numbers but human behavior. He made a call. Had his assistant arrange a chance meeting at a charity gala Meridian's partners would attend. Donald almost didn't go. The ticket was $500 she didn't have. But her boss insisted. Networking opportunity, he said. Career advancement. She wore a dress from Rent the Runway. $200 for 4 days. Black. Simple. Elegant enough not to embarrass her. Cheap enough not to bankrupt her. Marcus approached at exactly 9:47 p.m. He'd timed it. After the speeches. After the wine had loosened everyone's guard. But before people started leaving. You wrote the Meridian analysis, he said. Not a question. A statement. Donald looked up. She'd seen his photo in Forbes. On CNBC. But in person, Marcus' faith was different. Commanding. The kind of presence that made you stand straighter without realizing it. I did, she said. It was excellent. He paused. Your father would have been proud. Donald's expression flickered. Just for a second. Pain she'd learned to hide. You knew my father? I did. Long time ago. Marcus smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. I'm sorry for your loss. That night, Marcus played his role perfectly. Charming. Interested. He asked about her work. Her dreams. He listened like she was the only person in the room worth hearing. 3 days later, flowers arrived at her apartment. Peonies. Her favorite. She'd mentioned them once. The card read, Dinner? MF. If you were in Donald's position, 28, broke and suddenly noticed by a billionaire, would you have said yes? Let me know what you think. Donald said yes to dinner. What choice did she have? A billionaire was interested. Not just in her work. In her. For the first time since her father died, someone saw her as more than Richard Sterling's bankrupt daughter. Marcus took her to Le Bernardin. The kind of restaurant where the menu has no prices and the sommelier earns more than Donald's annual salary. He was perfect. Attentive. Asked about her dreams, her childhood, the pressure of living up to her father's name. He listened like her words mattered. Your father and I were partners once, Marcus said over the second course. Did you know that? Donald froze. No. He never mentioned you. We had a falling out. Business disagreement. Marcus smiled, smooth as aged whiskey. But that was a lifetime ago. I don't hold grudges. Liar. But Donald didn't know that yet. The courtship was a masterclass in manipulation. Private jet to Miami for a weekend. Front row seats to Hamilton. A Cartier bracelet that cost more than her rent. Just because. Her friends warned her. He's too old. Too rich. What does he want? But when you're drowning, you don't question the hand that pulls you up. 3 months later, Marcus proposed. They were in Paris. The Ritz. He'd flown them out on 48 hours' notice because Donald mentioned she'd never been. The ring was a flawless 8-carat diamond that caught light like captured fire. Marry me, he said. Simple. Direct. The way he approached everything. Donald looked at this powerful, sophisticated man who'd chosen her out of millions of women. Who made her feel safe for the first time since her father died. She said yes. They married 3 weeks later. Small ceremony. City Hall. Just them and 2 witnesses Marcus hired. No family. Donald had none left. Marcus claimed he preferred intimate. The truth. He didn't want anyone asking questions. Donald moved into the penthouse on Central Park West the day after the wedding. $47 million of marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, and silence so complete it felt like living inside a museum. Marcus gave her a black American Express card with no limit. Buy whatever you want, he said. You're my wife now. She bought books. Art supplies. Small things that made the massive space feel less empty. He bought her designer clothes she never asked for. Jewelry that sat in velvet boxes untouched. A Tesla Model S she was afraid to drive. The first month was almost normal. Marcus came home by 8. They had dinner together. He asked about her day, she'd quit Meridian, was exploring what to do next. But by month 2, cracks appeared. Marcus worked later. Came home at 10. 11. Sometimes not at all. Business, he'd say. Always business. When he was home, he was distant. Checked his phone during dinner. Fell asleep without touching her. Their bedroom became a space where two strangers slept on opposite sides of a California king. Donald told herself it was normal. Adjustment period. Marriage took work. But something felt wrong. At charity galas, Marcus introduced her as my wife, like she was an acquisition. Another asset in his portfolio. He'd place his hand on her lower back, possessive, not affectionate, and steer her through conversations where he'd talk and she'd smile. The perfect accessory. One night, 6 months in, Donald found him in his study. 2 a.m. Tumbler of scotch in hand, staring at a photograph. "Who's that?" she asked. Marcus looked up. For a second, something flickered across his face. Something cold. "No one," he said. He slid the photo into a drawer. "Go back to bed." But Donald had seen it. A younger Marcus. And another man. She didn't recognize him. But something about the way Marcus hid that photo made her skin prickle. Year 2 was worse. Marcus stopped pretending. The late nights became overnight trips. The distance became ice. He criticized everything. The way she dressed. Her opinions. Her existence. "You're embarrassing me," he'd say at events when she spoke up. "Let the adults talk." Donald shrunk. Became smaller. Quieter. The confident woman who'd impressed him with her analysis became a ghost in her own home. But here's what Marcus didn't know. Donald Sterling was her father's daughter. And Richard Sterling, for all his faults, had taught her one crucial skill: survival. She started paying attention. Really paying attention. Marcus kept files in his study. Locked. But locks can be picked when you have time and determination. She found them on a Thursday afternoon. Financial records. Business deals. Emails going back 30 years. And there, buried in a folder labeled personal, she found it. A partnership agreement. Sterling Analytics. Founded by Richard Sterling and Marcus Faith. A legal complaint. Marcus Faith versus Richard Sterling. Fraud. Embezzlement. Bankruptcy. Newspaper clippings. Local businessman ruined by partner's betrayal. And photographs. Her father, younger, laughing. Marcus beside him, before the gray hair, before the billions, before the hatred. Donald sat on the floor of Marcus's study, surrounded by evidence of a 30-year grudge, and understood. He didn't love her. He'd never loved her. This was revenge. The marriage. The gifts. The cruelty. All of it designed to destroy her the way her father had destroyed him. Donald felt something shift inside her. Not heartbreak. She'd stopped loving Marcus months ago. Something colder. Sharper. If Marcus wanted to play games, she'd play. But she'd play to win. That night, Donald made 3 decisions that would change everything. First, she would stay. Walking away would give Marcus exactly what he wanted. Her destroyed, broken, defeated. Second, she would learn everything. About Faith Industries. About Marcus's business. About every weakness in his empire. Third, she would take everything he had. Not for revenge. For justice. Her father had wronged Marcus. She'd found enough evidence to know that was true. But Marcus had chosen the wrong target. Donald Sterling hadn't betrayed anyone. And she was about to become his biggest mistake. At this point, Donald had to choose between running or fighting back. Most people would have left. Taken whatever settlement they could get and started over. But Donald chose war. What would you have done? This decision would define everything that came next. Donald became a student of her husband's empire. Every morning after Marcus left for work, she'd unlock his study, photograph documents, memorize names, map his business relationships like a general studying enemy territory. Faith Industries was a labyrinth. 37 subsidiary companies, investments in 83 different ventures, real estate holdings across 14 countries. But empires this large have cracks. Donald just had to find them. She started small, attended charity events Marcus deemed beneath him, smiled at his business partners' wives, asked innocent questions about their husbands' work. Marcus mentioned the Singapore deal, she'd say. So exciting. They'd talk. People always talked when they thought you were harmless. Donald learned that Faith Industries' largest holding, a commercial real estate portfolio worth $2.3 billion, was built on overleveraged properties. One market shift and the whole thing could collapse. She learned Marcus had enemies. Rivals he'd crushed on his way up. Partners he'd betrayed when they were no longer useful. She learned his weaknesses. And she started building her plan. Year 3 was Donald's masterpiece in acting. She played the perfect wife. Devoted. Submissive. Everything Marcus wanted her to be. At galas, she smiled and stayed silent. At business dinners, she laughed at his jokes and made him look good. At home, she endured his coldness without complaint. Marcus thought he was winning. Thought he'd broken her completely. He had no idea she was 3 steps ahead. Donald enrolled in online courses. Corporate law. Forensic accounting. Business strategy. She studied while Marcus worked late, while he traveled, while he paraded mistresses. She befriended his executive assistant, Victoria. Took her to lunch. Listened to her complain about Marcus's impossible demands. Built trust. 6 months later, Victoria was forwarding Donald copies of Marcus's calendar. His emails. His private meeting notes. Donald also reached out to someone she'd found in Marcus's old files. James Chen. Former business partner. One of the men Marcus had destroyed on his climb to the top. They met at a coffee shop in Brooklyn. James was 60, retired, living comfortably but still bitter. "Why should I help you?" he asked. "Because Marcus' faith ruined you," Donald said. "And I'm going to return the favor. I just need to know where the bodies are buried." James smiled. Then he started talking. Year 4 nearly broke her. Marcus escalated. The cruelty became sharper. More public. At a charity gala in the Hamptons, he introduced his mistress to Donald. Actually walked up with a 26-year-old model named Sienna and said, "Darling, this is my friend. We work together." The look in his eyes dared her to react. Donald shook Sienna's hand. Smiled. Said it was lovely to meet her. Inside she was screaming. That night, alone in the penthouse, Donald stood at the window and stared at the city 47 floors below. For the first time since she'd started this, she wondered if it was worth it. The humiliation. The loneliness. The exhaustion of playing a role every single day. She could leave. Take whatever she could get in a divorce. Start over. But then she thought about her father. About Marcus's 30-year grudge. About the fact that he'd married her specifically to destroy her. And she remembered something Richard Sterling used to say, "Never let them see you weak. And never, ever surrender." Donald stepped back from the window. She wasn't done yet. By year 5, Donald had built an arsenal. She had documentation of every questionable deal Marcus had made in the past decade. The zoning violations. The bribes disguised as consulting fees. The offshore accounts that skirted tax laws. She had testimony from James Chen and 4 other former partners willing to go on record about Marcus's business practices. She had evidence of affairs with subordinates. Hostile work environment complaints swept under the rug with NDAs and cash. She had access to his finances, his calendar, his passwords. Victoria had proven invaluable. And she had something Marcus didn't know about. Donald had been meeting with 3 of Faith Industries' largest investors. Quietly. Over lunches Marcus didn't know about. Building relationships. planting doubts about Marcus's leadership. "He's erratic," she'd say. "The stress, you know. I'm worried about him." They listened. Because Donald was smart, credible, and seemed genuinely concerned about the company. She was building a coalition. People who'd side with her when the time came. But Donald needed one more thing to make this work. Timing. Do you think Donald should have just taken the evidence to the authorities? Or was building this elaborate plan the only way to truly beat Marcus at his own game? Share your perspective below. Donald's opportunity came from an unexpected source. Marcus was planning a massive acquisition. TechVision Industries. A tech company worth $1.8 billion. The deal would make Faith Industries a major player in the tech sector. Marcus had been working on it for 18 months. It was his legacy play. The thing that would cement his name in business history. He talked about it constantly. How it would work. How brilliant he was for seeing the opportunity. Donald listened. Smiled. Played the supportive wife. And then she made a call to Maxwell Rivera, TechVision's CEO. They met at his office. Private. Just the two of them. "Your company is worth more than Marcus is offering," Donald said. "But you're desperate enough to take his lowball bid." "Why?" Maxwell hesitated. Then he admitted the truth. Cash flow problems. A failed product launch. TechVision needed the acquisition to survive. "What if I could solve your cash flow problem?" Donald asked. "What would that be worth to you?" Donald had been watching Marcus's investments. She knew which ones were underperforming, which ones he'd been trying to unload. She also knew something Marcus didn't. One of his struggling investments, a renewable energy company called Solar Edge, was about to land a government contract worth $300 million. She'd found out through her network. Through paying attention. Through being underestimated. Donald brokered a deal. She convinced 3 investors to back TechVision with a $200 million emergency fund. In exchange, they'd get preferred shares when TechVision went public in 2 years. Maxwell Rivera canceled the Faith Industries acquisition. Marcus was blindsided. The deal that was supposed to define his legacy? Gone. And he had no idea his wife was responsible. We're at the midpoint of this incredible story. If you're still here, I genuinely appreciate you. What's kept you engaged so far? Let me know in the comments. The TechVision deal falling apart changed everything. Marcus became obsessed. Paranoid. He hired investigators to figure out what happened. Screamed at lawyers. Threw his phone across the penthouse when calls went unanswered. And Donald. She watched. Silent. Supportive. "I'm so sorry, darling," she'd say. "You worked so hard on that deal." Marcus barely looked at her. In his mind she was furniture. Incapable of understanding business. Much less sabotaging him. His first mistake was underestimating her. His second was what came next. With the TechVision failure, Faith Industries investors started asking questions. The stock dipped 3%. Not catastrophic, but enough to make the board nervous. Donald had been cultivating relationships with 3 key board members for 18 months. Gregory Torres, Susan Williamson, David Park. She invited them to lunch. Separately. Always somewhere Marcus would never go. "I'm worried about Marcus," she'd confide. "The stress is affecting his judgment. He's not sleeping. Making impulsive decisions." She showed them documentation. Failed deals. Overextended investments. The overleveraged real estate portfolio that could collapse with one interest rate hike. "I love my husband," Donald would say. "But Faith Industries is bigger than any one person. The company needs protection." They listened. Because Donald wasn't emotional. She was analytical. Professional. She presented problems with solutions. And slowly she built her coalition. By month 4 after TechVision, Donald had secured promises from board members controlling 43% of voting shares. She needed 51%. Donald's breakthrough came from an unexpected place. Marcus's former partner, James Chen, Introduced her to an investigative journalist named Rachel Morrison. Wall Street Journal. Pulitzer finalist. The kind of reporter who ended careers. Why do you want to help me? Donald asked over coffee. Because I've been investigating Marcus Faith for 2 years, Rachel said. And I can't get anyone to talk. NDAs. Fear. Money. But you're inside. You have access. What do you need? Everything you've got. Donald had been collecting evidence for 4 years. Documents. Recordings. Testimonies from former employees. Proof of financial manipulation. Hostile work environments. Bribes disguised as consulting fees. She gave Rachel copies of everything. When does this run? Donald asked. When I have enough to survive his lawyers. 3 months. Maybe 4. Donald smiled. That's perfect timing. Because in 3 months, Faith Industries would hold its annual shareholder meeting. And Donald had plans for that meeting. Donald spent the next 90 days executing the most important phase of her plan. She secured 2 more board members. 57% of voting shares now aligned with her vision for Faith Industries' future. She worked with Rachel Morrison, providing additional documentation, connecting her with sources, building an exposé that would devastate Marcus's reputation. She also did something Marcus never expected. She started her own investment fund. Sterling Capital. Seed money from investors who'd grown frustrated with Marcus's erratic behavior. $200 million under management. Her first investment? Solar Edge. The renewable energy company Marcus was trying to sell. The one about to land a $300 million government contract. Donald bought Marcus's stake for $80 million. He thought he was dumping a failed investment. 2 weeks later, the government contract was announced. Solar Edge's valuation tripled overnight. Donald's investment was suddenly worth $240 million. She'd made $160 million in 14 days. The business press noticed. Forbes ran a profile, The Quiet Rise of Donald Sterling Faith. Marcus read it over breakfast. Threw the magazine across the table. You got lucky, he said. Donald sipped her coffee. Maybe. But luck had nothing to do with it. The shareholder meeting was scheduled for March 15th. Their 5th wedding anniversary was March 14th. Donald had planned this timing meticulously. She wanted Marcus to have one final night thinking he'd won. Thinking he'd destroyed Richard Sterling's daughter completely. She wanted him to feel safe. Because the fall from safety to ruin, that's where revenge truly lived. The night before the meeting, Donald prepared. She had Rachel Morrison ready to publish. Board members ready to vote. Lawyers ready to file. Everything was in place. But first, there was the anniversary dinner. Marcus had made reservations at Per Se, the same restaurant where he'd first told Donald he loved her. He'd never loved her. But Donald would let him pretend one more time. Because tomorrow, Marcus Faith's world would end. And Donald Sterling would finally get justice. At this point, Donald has transformed from a broke, grieving daughter into a strategic businesswoman with the power to destroy her husband. Do you think people can truly change, or does our core nature stay the same? This is important for what comes next. March 14th. 5 years to the day since Marcus Faith married Donald Sterling. The penthouse was silent except for rain against the windows. Donald stood in front of her mirror, fastening a diamond necklace Marcus had given her on their first anniversary. She wore black. Elegant. Simple. The kind of dress you wear to funerals. Marcus was already in the living room, pouring scotch. Expensive suit. Gray hair perfectly styled. He looked exactly like what he was, a billionaire who believed he'd already won. Ready? He asked when Donald emerged. Almost. She picked up her clutch. Inside, her phone, lipstick, and a USB drive containing 5 years of evidence. They drove to Per Se in silence. The restaurant was intimate. Soft lighting. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. The kind of place where proposals happened and deals were made. They ordered. Marcus chose the wine, a Bordeaux that cost more than Donald's first month's rent in Queens. 5 years, Marcus said, raising his glass. Time flies. Donald touched her glass to his. Said nothing. They ate in silence. Marcus checked his phone twice. Donald studied him. This man who'd married her for revenge. Who'd spent half a decade trying to break her. He had no idea what was coming. Dessert arrived. Chocolate souffle. Marcus barely touched his. That's when he said it. I need to tell you something. He set down his fork. I've been meaning to say this for a while. Donald felt her pulse quicken. This was it. The moment she'd been waiting for. You've repulsed me since day one, Marcus said. Each word deliberate. Cold. Did you really think I loved you? Donald didn't flinch. Didn't cry. Didn't react at all. Your father destroyed me 30 years ago. Took everything I built. Left me bankrupt and broken. Marcus leaned forward. So I married his daughter. Gave you everything he stole from me. Made you dependent. And now I'm going to take it all back. The cruelty in his voice was absolute. This was his victory speech. His moment of triumph. Donald set down her napkin. Slowly. Carefully. And then she smiled. I know, Donald said softly. Marcus froze. What? I've known for 4 years. Since I found the files in your study. The partnership agreement. The lawsuit. All of it. The color drained from Marcus's face. You married me for revenge, Donald continued. Her voice calm. Steady. But you made one critical mistake. You underestimated me. She pulled out her phone. Opened an email. Turned the screen toward Marcus. It was from the Wall Street Journal. Subject line. Story runs tomorrow at 6 a.m. Rachel Morrison's expose on Faith Industries, Donald explained. Financial manipulation. Hostile work environments. Offshore accounts. Every illegal thing you've done for the past decade. It's all there. Marcus's hands trembled. You can't. I already have. Donald opened another email. Tomorrow's shareholder meeting? I control 57% of the board. They're voting you out as CEO. I'm taking your company. That's impossible. Is it? Donald smiled. You spent 5 years teaching me how to be ruthless. I was an excellent student. She stood. Placed cash on the table for her half of dinner. Sterling Capital now manages $400 million in assets. My SolarEdge investment made me personally wealthy. And tomorrow, when the journal article drops and the board removes you, Faith Industries will be mine. Marcus sat frozen. His empire collapsing in real time. You wanted to destroy Richard Sterling's daughter, Donald said. But you created something much worse. You created an enemy who learned from the best. She picked up her clutch. Happy anniversary, Marcus. Donald walked out of Per Se with her head high. 5 years of playing the victim. Of enduring humiliation. Of building her arsenal in silence. Tomorrow, Marcus Faith would lose everything. Tonight, Donald Sterling had already won. Marcus sat alone at the table for 20 minutes. His phone buzzed. Text from his lawyer. The board had called an emergency meeting. Another text. From an investor. What the hell is going on? His world was ending. And he'd never seen it coming. The confrontation is over. Do you feel satisfied with how this played out? Or would you have wanted Donald to do something different? There's no wrong answer here. The Wall Street Journal article hit at 6 a.m. on March 15th. The headline, Faith Industries CEO, a legacy built on manipulation and fear. Rachel Morrison had done her job perfectly. 30 years of Marcus Faith's business practices exposed. Documents. Testimonies. Financial records that showed a pattern of corruption, intimidation, and fraud. By 8 a.m., Faith Industries stock had dropped 12%. By 10 a.m., the board had convened their emergency meeting. By noon, Marcus Faith was no longer CEO of the company he'd built. The vote was unanimous. Even his loyalists abandoned him. Because when you build an empire on fear, Loyalty disappears the moment you show weakness. Donald wasn't at the meeting. She didn't need to be. Her coalition had done exactly what she'd engineered them to do. She was in her lawyer's office, signing divorce papers. The settlement was clean. She kept the penthouse, paid for. She kept her investment fund. She kept everything she'd built. Marcus kept his shame. The next 6 months were brutal for Marcus Faith. Federal investigators opened inquiries into Faith Industries' offshore accounts. The SEC launched a formal investigation into financial irregularities. 3 former employees filed lawsuits for hostile work environment violations. Marcus hired the best lawyers money could buy. But money can't erase evidence. And Donald had given Rachel Morrison everything. Faith Industries survived. Barely. The board installed interim leadership. Restructured. Rebranded. Marcus's shares, once worth $4.2 billion, dropped to $1.8 billion. Still wealthy by any measure. But his reputation. Destroyed. He moved out of the penthouse into a townhouse in Tribeca. Still luxury. Still expensive. But smaller. Quieter. The kind of place you go when the world no longer wants to see you. His phone stopped ringing. Gala invitations dried up. Business partners who'd once courted his favor suddenly had scheduling conflicts. Marcus Faith became what he'd feared most. Irrelevant. Donald, meanwhile, thrived. Sterling Capital grew to $1.2 billion in assets under management within 18 months. Her investment strategy, aggressive, intelligent, informed by everything Marcus had unwittingly taught her, delivered consistent returns. She became known in financial circles as the quiet strategist. Someone who didn't seek publicity but whose moves were studied by analysts. Forbes named her one of the top 50 female investors under 40. CNBC invited her for interviews. Harvard asked her to speak at their business school. Donald accepted the Harvard invitation. Stood at the same podium where she'd graduated 15 years earlier, broke and grieving. She looked at the students. Hungry, ambitious, terrified of failure. Success isn't about never falling, she told them. It's about what you build when you're on the ground. The applause was genuine. Because everyone loves a comeback story. What they didn't know, what Donald would never tell them, was that she'd engineered this comeback from day one of her marriage. That every humiliation had been fuel. Every cruelty had sharpened her focus. Marcus Faith thought he was destroying her. He was forging her. 2 years after the divorce, Donald sat in her penthouse now, and thought about the journey. She didn't hate Marcus anymore. Hate required energy, and she had none left to spare on him. What she felt was something closer to pity. He'd wasted 30 years on revenge against her father. Then wasted 5 more trying to destroy her. 35 years of bitterness. Of rage. Of letting the past consume everything. Donald had spent 5 years planning revenge. But the revenge itself? That wasn't what freed her. Building Sterling Capital freed her. Proving she was brilliant independent of anyone's opinion freed her. Becoming someone her father would be proud of, that freed her. Marcus gave her cruelty. She turned it into capital. He gave her humiliation. She turned it into hunger. He gave her a masterclass in ruthlessness. And she graduated with honors. Today, Donald Sterling runs an investment fund worth $2.3 billion. She lives in the Central Park West penthouse. She mentors young women in finance. She's building the life she always deserved. Marcus Faith lives in Tribeca. Still wealthy. Still angry. Still bitter about a betrayal that happened 35 years ago. Some people never learn. Donald did. And that made all the difference. Looking at where everyone ended up, do you believe in karma? Or is this just the natural consequence of choices? I want to hear what you think. So what does Donald Sterling's story teach us? It's not about revenge. Not really. It's about refusing to let someone else's cruelty define your worth. Marcus Faith spent 35 years consumed by bitterness. He built an empire, yes. Made billions. But every dollar was tainted by rage. Every success measured against a betrayal that happened decades ago. He won the game of wealth. But he lost at life. Donald, on the other hand, learned something Marcus never could. The best revenge isn't destruction. It's becoming so successful that their opinion of you becomes irrelevant. In a rare interview last year, Donald was asked what advice she'd give to people facing impossible circumstances. Her answer was simple. Stop waiting for justice. Create it yourself. She explained that for 5 years, she could have left Marcus. Could have taken a settlement and started over. Many people would have. But I realized something, she said. He married me to destroy my father's legacy. If I walked away broken, he won. So I decided to build something better than revenge. I built excellence. That's the difference between victims and survivors. Victims wait for apologies. Survivors build empires. Donald built an empire. Here's what Donald's story really shows us. Success isn't about where you start. It's about what you do when someone tries to keep you down. She started with nothing. A dead father. Crushing debt. A husband who hated her. She could have crumbled. Most people would have. Instead, she studied, planned, executed. She turned a 5-year prison sentence into a masterclass in strategic thinking. Marcus gave her access to wealth, power, and elite circles. He thought she was too weak to use those tools. She used every single one. The penthouse he bought to flaunt his power? She kept it. The business contacts he introduced her to? She turned them into allies. The cruelty he showed her? She transformed it into fuel. That's not revenge. That's alchemy. Donald Sterling is 35 years old now. She runs a multi-billion-dollar investment fund. She mentors young women. She lives exactly the life she wants. And Marcus Faith. He's wealthy, lonely, bitter, still angry about something that happened before Donald was even born. Some people never escape their past. They carry it like chains, letting old wounds dictate every decision. Donald escaped, not by forgetting what Marcus did to her, but by refusing to let it define her future. That's the real lesson here. Your circumstances don't determine your destiny. Your response to those circumstances does. Marcus thought destroying Donald would heal his pain. It didn't. Because revenge never heals anything. Donald thought revenge would satisfy her. But what actually brought peace was building a life so good that Marcus's opinion became background noise. At the end of the day, Donald Sterling's smile at that anniversary dinner wasn't about revenge. It was about freedom. Freedom from needing Marcus's approval. From caring what he thought. From letting his cruelty have power over her. She smiled because she'd already won. Not by destroying him. By becoming someone he could never touch. And that, more than any revenge, is the sweetest victory of all. That's the story of Donald Sterling. The woman who turned humiliation into power. Cruelty into capital. And a marriage built on revenge into the foundation of her empire. What will you build from your struggles? We started this story with a question. What would you do if you discovered the man you loved married you for revenge? Donald Sterling answered that question over 5 years of patience, planning, and perfect execution. She went from broke and grieving to running a $2.3 billion investment fund. From Marcus Faith's victim to his greatest adversary. From a woman he thought he'd destroyed to the architect of his downfall. But here's what makes this story truly remarkable. Donald didn't win by becoming like Marcus. She won by becoming better than him. He chose bitterness. She chose brilliance. He chose revenge that consumed 35 years of his life. She chose success that freed her in 5. He's still angry about a betrayal from decades ago. She's building the future she deserves. That's not just a comeback story. That's a masterclass in turning pain into power. You might be thinking, that's great for Donald, but what does this have to do with me? Everything. Because Donald's story isn't really about billions or penthouses or business empires. It's about refusing to let someone else's cruelty write your story. Maybe you're not married to a billionaire seeking revenge. But maybe someone told you that you weren't good enough. That you'd never amount to anything. That your dreams were foolish. Maybe life dealt you circumstances you didn't choose. Loss, debt, betrayal, failure. Here's what Donald's story proves. Your starting point doesn't determine your destination. She started at rock bottom. Father dead. Bankrupt. Married to a man who hated her. She ended at the top. Successful. Free. Living exactly the life she built for herself. The difference wasn't luck. It was choice. Every day, Donald chose to keep building. Keep learning. Keep moving forward. Even when Marcus tried to break her. Even when the world saw her as nothing but his wife. Even when quitting would have been easier. She kept going. And that's the lesson here. Whatever you're facing right now, remember this. Excellence is the best revenge. Not because it hurts your enemies, though it might, but because it frees you from needing their validation. Donald didn't destroy Marcus to feel successful. She built success that made Marcus irrelevant. That's the goal. Not revenge. Irrelevance. Build a life so good that the people who doubted you become background noise. So complete that their opinions don't register anymore. That's real freedom. That's real power. If this story moved you, inspired you, or taught you something valuable about resilience and success, please leave a like and share your biggest takeaway in the comments. I read every single one, and your insights make this community special. Next time, I'll be telling you about Sarah Chen, a single mother who went from homeless to owning a tech company worth $50 million, all while raising 3 kids alone. Her story of sacrifice, determination, and ultimate triumph will absolutely blow your mind. You won't want to miss it. But before you go, remember this. You are not defined by what others think of you. You are defined by how you respond when life tests you. Donald Sterling proved that the best response to cruelty isn't revenge. It's building a life so beautiful that your critics become irrelevant. Until next time, stay strong, stay focused, and never let anyone convince you that you're nothing. You're everything you choose to become. And that smile. That mysterious smile Donald gave Marcus when he finally revealed his hatred? It wasn't about revenge. It was about knowing she'd already won. Now go build your empire. I am the story keeper.